Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to John Knox Presbyterian Church. We are so happy that you have chosen to be here today to share in the dynamic witness to the living rock of our salvation. You will notice in your program that between the fifth and sixth movements, there will be an opportunity to help the refugees in Ukraine through NOROC, a missionary agency in Romania on the border of Ukraine. The Muskingum Valley Presbytery Council will match funds donated up to $15,000. Please give as you are inspired and able, and thank you in advance for your generosity. Following the performance, we invite you all to the Fellowship Hall to enjoy beverages and light refreshments. What better way to share the gift of Easter than with new friends? I'd personally like to acknowledge that we wouldn't be here today without the hard work and dedication of the Cantata singers, the orchestra, and their director, who have freely dedicated time and talent to make today a reality. In the words of Lloyd Larson, quote, "No stone could hold him," is a reminder that the God who created the heavens and earth has dominion over them. We see that the author of life can conquer even the seemingly impenetrable finality of death. That power is fully demonstrated in the resurrection story of Jesus. An immovable stone sealing the tomb and presumably signaling the end of Christ's earthly influence, merely becomes an open gateway through which his message penetrates the world. Jesus is truly our living and eternal rock. Enjoy the program.
Jesus Jesus, the Holy Son of God, had been sent to serve and save those who would receive his message of eternal hope. Led by the Spirit of God into the desert, 40 days of prayer and fasting had prepared him for that which was to come. The earthly ministry he would soon begin, a journey destined to be a blend of joys and sorrows. In this wilderness experience, Jesus had remained faithful and had not faltered in the face of Satan's temptations.
Jesus began his ministry by calling his disciples. He passionately taught them and others, providing hope and healing to all who would listen. Compelling messages of grace and love inspired people from every walk of life to heed the Master's call, turn from their sinful ways, and follow him. He was the way, the truth, and the life. This was the Christ, the living rock, on which all persons could take their stand and build their faith in the living God. The growing popularity of Jesus and the expanding presence of devoted followers over the 3-year span of his ministry did not go unnoticed by religious and political leaders of his day. There was rising concern among them about this man and what they perceived to be a false portrayal of true faith.
Amidst Christ's clarion call for people to turn and follow him, winds of change were beginning to blow. Growing unrest was evolving into evil plots to undermine and end the influence of this teacher, the humble man from Galilee. Large crowds often gathered around Jesus simply to be near him, to hear his teachings, or to observe his miracles. It was now time for the Jewish Passover, and again, Jesus was surrounded by a large host of devoted followers. As he prepared to enter Jerusalem for the holy festival, the people shouted their praise for all they had witnessed through him. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, blessed is the King of Israel."
Defiant religious leaders said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Tell them to silence their voices." But Jesus responded, "I tell you this, if they keep quiet, the very rocks themselves will cry out in praise."
Rocks will cry out. Rocks keep silent.
During the Passover festival, Jesus gathered his disciples to share the Passover meal. As he shared with them in this intimate gathering, he took bread and the cup, offered it to them, saying, "Take this, eat and drink it in remembrance of me." It was a foreshadowing of the hours which were soon to come.
Following the meal, Jesus went to Gethsemane to pray. In agony, he prayed to his Father for strength to walk the path which was before him, a path that would lead to abandonment and rejection by his closest followers, a path that would lead to false accusations by those he had come to save, a path that would ultimately lead to his death.
In the darkest and loneliest of hours, in the midst of agony and deepest despair, Jesus reflected a resolute commitment, much like he had revealed in the desert of temptations, to fulfill the plan he had been called to do. He was truly a rock in a desert of shifting sand.
First of all, I would like to say it has been an absolute pleasure to work with the choir from Faith Methodist. They are responsive and really nice people. So it is our pleasure, and I think I speak for everyone here. Want to give you a little bit of heads up on the next piece that's going to be played. The offering, and I'm just reiterating, whatever goes into this offering, 100%, every penny goes to the Ukraine. The piece that's going to be played, there'll be some words go on your screen. It's based on a hymn tune, the tune written in the 1930s. Don't want you to try to sing, but it will give you some things to think about. So the tune starts in the morning of Palm Sunday when there's not much going on, and it gets a little more interesting as the day goes on.
Consensus had been reached. The religious leaders had agreed that crucifixion upon a cross was the appropriate sentence. Having secured the needed government approval, Jesus was led to Golgotha, the place of the skull, to be crucified.
In a final act of submission, Jesus was nailed to a cross to die a criminal's death. Standing beneath that cross, the faithful few who witnessed his final hours and heard his final words found confirmation deep in their souls that this was indeed the Christ. the precious cornerstone of their faith, now torn from the earth's very foundation.
As evening approached, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph came to bury the body of Jesus. Having received permission from Pilate to do so, he took down the body, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb, one he had cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a large stone in front of the entrance.
Concerned that the followers of Christ might attempt to steal the body and tell others that he had been raised from the dead, Pilate ordered that the tomb be secured by placing a seal upon it, with guards stationed there to ensure that nothing would happen.
It was now early morning on the first day of the week. Mary Magdalene and some of the other women made their way to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus. As they approached the tomb, they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the tomb?"